Every day and everywhere we go, we have faced the beat of the changing environment, from biodiversity conservation to climate change. And these have constantly mounted the expectations of the UN Climate Conference. And of course, COP’29 was no different. With pressures to produce an outcome on climate finance, the annual summit started on November 11th and was scheduled to end on the 22nd of November in Baku, Azerbaijan. And it was shaped up to be a finance COP where discussions on the new collective quantified goal for climate finance, or in other words, how much money should be channeled to developing countries to help them take climate action, was expected to conclude. However, the final decisions in Baku seems to have left tensions far from being resolved, and many expectations unmet, with Global South leaders unsatisfied and unhappy with the final draft text outline. Some even refer to the proposal as a joke and totally unacceptable. According to them, COP’29 fell far short of Africa's hopes. Here's the reports. Over the past 2 weeks, all eyes have been on Baku, Azerbaijan, which has been the epicenter of global climate action. The 2 weeks underscored significant challenges and a troubling lack of consensus on critical issues, from the fierce debate over climate finance to the stalled progress on fossil fuel transitions. The conference laid bare the deep division shaping global climate negotiations. And at the start of the summit's second week, focus turned to the presidency in steering the negotiations. The developing nations were united in calling the wealthier countries to raise $1.3 trillion a year in climate finance, with negotiators agreeing to raise the amount each year from a wide range of sources, including private investments, by 2035. Through the process, some countries, including India and Nigeria, accused the COP’29 presidency of pushing the deal through without their proper consent, following chaotic last-minute negotiations. COP’29 entered its final day, scheduled in Baku on the 22nd of November, with a 6-hour single meeting, which witnessed unanimous disappointment over the state of draft text, with developing countries unhappy about the lack of numbers on the climate finance and almost all calling for clearer language on climate action. The draft finance unveiled on 22nd of November at the UN Climate Conference was said to have failed to make progress on the central question of how much money wealthy nations should provide to the poorer countries that are most vulnerable to the ravages of a warming world. No hard numbers were given, but the options for provision from groups in the range of $440 billion to $900 billion. These draft texts angered the developing nations by essentially leaving blank the financial commitments demanded. Eventually, the first presidency draft of the climate finance text was released, including a monetary figure of $250 billion, which also received near universal disapproval. Meanwhile, countries also failed to reach an agreement on how the outcomes of the last year's global stocktake, pledging to transition away from fossil fuels, should be taken, instead shunting the decision to COP’30 next year in Brazil. Although the Western countries blasted oil-producing countries at COP’29 for blocking the mention of fossil fuels in the two major negotiating texts, as negotiators blamed the bloc of countries led by Saudi Arabia for the lack of reference to fossil fuels, with a Saudi official stating that they will reject any climate deal that goes after fossil fuels at COP’29. Talks stretched into Saturday, 23rd November, with the COP’29 presidency spending the entire day in lengthy consultations with delegates. But things took a dramatic turn when two major developing country groups, the least developed countries and the Alliance of Small Island States, staged a temporary walkout, frustrated with the proposed finance deal and feeling sidelined in the negotiation process.
It's a very difficult moment. There is half of the world just walk out, or a very important proportion, and we need to engage deeply in negotiation. There is dissatisfaction from the South around the quantum and around some of the conditions that are in that text. I think that can be solved, but it requires political will and mobilizing.
We've just walked out. We came here to this COP for a fair deal. We feel that we haven't been heard, and there's a deal to be made, and we are not being consulted.
But at climate talks, it often comes down to just one thing: money, with negotiators after the final scheduled day deep in discussions over setting a new finance target, extended the talks by over 30 hours, came to an 11th-hour deal in the early hours of Sunday morning, with wealthy nations pledging $300 billion a year by 2035 to help developing nations tackle climate change.
New collective quantified goal on climate finance. I hereby invite the CMA to adopt the draft decision contained in document CMA/2024L.22.
This sparked furious condemnation from developing countries, who described the outcome as a joke. Indian delegate representative Chadni Raina called out the COP’29 presidency and the UNFCCC Secretariat for not accommodating their request to make a statement prior to the gaveling in the draft decision on a new climate finance goal, expressing the extreme disappointment with the incident, while other African countries refer to the commitment as too little, too late, and too ambiguous in its delivery.
We absolutely object to this unfair means followed for adoption. Our 2030 estimates tell us that we need to do it at 1.3 trillion per year till 2030. But we have only been agreeable to have, or we have a proposal that talks about $300 billion mobilization goal. It does not address the needs and priorities of developing countries. We are faced with one of the biggest challenges. India does not accept the goal proposal in its present form. For a mobilization goal of a mere sum of $300 billion, and that too to be reached only by 2035, that's almost 11 years later. The goal is too little, too distant. It is 2035, it's too far gone.
That the developing country is saying that it's taking the lead with $300 billion till 2035 is a joke. And it's not something we should take lightly. I do not think it's something we should clap our hands and force us to take it. I do not think so. I think we should rethink it. It's not just by putting it in our statements, but we have a right as countries to choose if we're going to take this or not. And I'm saying that we do not accept this. You expect us to have ambitious NDCs. The NCQG was supposed to enable us to have realistic finance goals. $300 billion is unrealistic. Let us tell ourselves the truth. This is 3 a.m. and we are going to clap our hands and say this is what we're going to do? I don't think so.
In a more positive development, the Article 6 agreement was finalized at COP’29, regarded as a momentous win for the international carbon market, setting rules for global markets to buy and sell carbon credits. Supporters believe this would unlock billions of dollars for projects to fight global warming. After years of false starts, many are calling this the last real chance to get it right, although concerns remain about how carbon markets would actually work.
I invite the CMA to adopt the draft decision contained in document CMA/2024/L.16. If no objections, thank you.
Looking ahead to COP30 in Brazil, the stakes couldn't be higher. After the deeply divided outcomes of COP29, many fear that momentum may have been lost. The frustration expressed by developing nations on a lackluster financial commitment leaves a heavy cloud of skepticism hanging over the road ahead. Countries and delegates have referred to COP29 as the worst COP ever, backtracking on the progress made at COP28 in Dubai. Many left with questions and doubts on if the Conference of the Parties is still effective in its current form. Well, that's quite a lot to unpack there. I know many feel discouraged and disappointed, but let's hang in there. As the dust has settled on COP’29, the spotlight is now on Brazil. The fractures exposed in Baku over finance, fossil fuel transitions, and equity serve as reminders of how much work lies ahead. The question now is whether leaders will rise to the occasion or allow these divisions and distrust to deepen. We can only hope that the next COP30 would offer a reset to address the grievances of the global south and to rebuild trust in the process, because if the leaders fail to bridge the divides and deliver concrete action, the risk is not just stalled negotiations, but the risk is also loss of faith in the UN climate framework itself. So let's have more of your thoughts on the just concluded COP29 in the comment section. Many thanks for watching. I'm Tony Gubanjo.